I'm just going to give you a little brief background of where I am and about myself. I actually was born into a Seventh-day Adventist home. My father was an Adventist minister. And I was born into that home. I actually have 6 brothers, well, still 5 now. 1 died 2 years ago. I have 6 brothers and 3 sisters, so I came from a large family. But my father, when I was born, was an Adventist minister, and so I grew up in Adventism. And I've never known anything else but Adventism, apart from when I became a Christian at age 22 and I began to study into different ideas, different religious ideas, because not only because I had a curious mind, but I wanted to be sure that what I was believing was correct. You know, I left Christianity when I was 17 years old because I started to work, and I went to church, and I knew that you had to be a Christian in order to be saved. And so when I was 13, I got baptized because my eldest brother was getting baptized. But I had no idea what I was doing. You know, I got baptized, but I like to say I went into the water as a dry sinner and I came out a wet sinner. It was like that because nothing happened. I just thought you need to be baptized. When I was 16 years old, maybe for the first time in my life, I believe God's tried to reach me. I had a graphic dream that I remember until today. At that time, I used to go to a high school 26 miles away from where I lived. And we used to travel in Jamaica on these big country buses. It's always full of market people, and Jamaican people, when they get together, they chat a lot and they laugh and make noise. So in my dream, I was on this bus, and it was full of people, and there was a lot of noise, and in my dream, I dozed off. And then I was aware in my dream that suddenly everything was quiet, and I knew the bus had not stopped. But I opened my eyes, and I saw there was nobody on the bus. I was alone on the bus, and then the bus began to pick up speed, and it began to rock from side to side, and I could see it was night outside, and the light was flashing on the trees. I looked at the driver's seat, and my blood went cold because the steering was just moving by itself. Something said to me, look behind. Look behind. And I was afraid, but I looked behind, and I looked down that long passage. And on the last seat at the back, there was a man sitting in a black rain suit, a shiny black raincoat. And his head was down. He had a black, shiny rain hat on his head. I couldn't see his face. And as I was looking, he began to raise his head. And the first thing I saw was his teeth, grinning. And he raised his head a little further, and I saw his eyes red. And I knew it was the devil. At that time, I think I was about 16 years old. And I'm sitting there looking. And he got up out of his seat, fixed his eyes on me. And he was grinning, and he started walking up the aisle. And I can't move. I'm sitting there, and he comes, and he stands right over me, and he says, I have you now. In my dream, I wasn't a Christian. I was going to church, I was religious, but in my dream, the first thing that happened, I cried out, Jesus, help me. And there was a flash, and the bus disappeared, and the devil disappeared, and I found myself standing at a crossroads. That direction led to where I lived at a place named Falmouth. That direction led to where I went to school in Montego Bay. And there was a third road going to a place called Chatham. I was at a place named Salt Marsh. And as I was standing there, I saw a girl coming out of the Chatham road, and she came to me. She says, you going home? I said, yes. She says, follow me. So I started to follow her. She was on the road going to Falmouth where I lived. And I was walking with her, but then I began to drop back because I noticed she was getting kind of like smoky. I could see through her. And we were on this broad road, and it was going like this, but as she was walking ahead, I saw her getting wispy, like smoke, and I was dropping back, and then I heard a voice out of the sky. At that time, I had a teacher in high school. He had a deep voice. And he said, Clayton, Do you want to reach home safely? I said, yes, sir. He said, don't follow the girl any further. Stop where you are, and I will send 2 messengers to take you home. So I stopped. At that place, there are mangrove swamps on both sides of the road. But as I looked, I saw 2 little boys come out of one of these mangrove swamps, and one took each hand, and they led me to a path among the bushes. And as I stepped on this path, I could see sunlight coming down through the trees, and I knew I was on the way home. And I woke up out of my dream, perspiring. And it was so graphic, I knew God was saying something. That's the first time and the only time in my life that I ever got a dream that I could say, God was speaking to me. I never had another dream like that. Even though when I became a Christian, I wanted to be a prophet. I asked God to give me a dream or a vision. I never got another dream. God had different plans. But when I was 17, I started working. And at that time, we lived at a little seaside village. Decadent, wild people. And I tell you, I was 17 and I started working, and for the first time, my parents couldn't control me anymore. And I got right into the life of that village, and I started to do things that I don't want to talk about. But, I started smoking marijuana, go up in the hills, playing poker with the boys, all kinds of things. I went spearfishing as often as I could, and in the nights I would be out on the street running around. So I knew that if there was a God, I was going to hell. So my father used to say to me, David, my father used to try to talk to me, and I had a way to get him off my back. I said, Daddy, does God know if I'm going to be saved? And of course he had to say yes. And I would say, well, if God knows I'm going to be saved, I can't be lost. And if God knows I'm going to be lost, I can't be saved. So save your breath. Okay? In other words, I was trying to say my destiny is sealed. God knows. Whatever you say, it doesn't matter. But still, I knew that I was on a road to destruction. And so one day, I was looking through the bookshelf, and I found a book that my father somehow had left on the bookshelf. It was entitled Chariots of the Gods. And this book tried to say that God was a spaceman. God was a visitor from outer space, and when he came down to earth, these primitive people thought that these spaceships were chariots of fire. So when Elijah was taken away in the chariot of fire, it was a spaceship. And that's how they described it in those days. And I wanted to believe it because I was into this lifestyle. So I started to tell people that I don't believe in God. For 5 years, it was like that. Until when I was 22 years old, I got myself into some bad trouble. I mean, it's something I still don't want to share because it was not only bad, it was disgraceful. And I don't like to expose that part of my life that much. But for 3 days, I didn't know what to do. I could not tell my parents. I could not tell my brothers. I thought of killing myself, and I couldn't think of any answer. And then on the 3rd day, this thought came to me. You never gave God a chance. There am I, and for the first time in 5 years, I'm realizing I really do believe in God. I do believe in God. I never stopped believing. I was just lying to myself. Because now, that's a thought that comes to me. You never gave God a chance. Because you have to understand, I was 22, and I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I didn't know where I was going. I was just drifting through life. I left high school. I got a job as soon as I left high school teaching as a pre-trained teacher, which was possible in Jamaica at that time. I wasn't fit to be a teacher, but, I was. And so I was making a little money. But I had no idea where I was going with my life. And everything, it seemed like everything was one disaster after another. And so what I needed, I didn't need religion. I didn't need church. What I needed was somebody to run my life. Amen. Who knew what he was doing. Amen. I think I was blessed to find God in this way. Because it wasn't about doctrine or religion or about church. It was just me needing somebody to take charge of my life, because I've never forgotten this, that you can't be a Christian until you have come to the place where you recognize you cannot do it. You cannot do anything. When you come to the place where you recognize that only God is fit to run this life, when you know this in your spirit, you're ready to become a Christian. Before this, you will only be a person who attends church, a person who knows doctrine. But to be a Christian, to be a child of God in that full sense, you need to come to the place where you recognize God is the only person qualified to run this life. So I thought of this and I thought, man, you can't turn to God now. 5 years you have been spitting in his face, and you're going to go to God now to ask God to help you? And that was human pride talking, and I thought, I can't go to God now. And so I resisted for a while. But then, you know, God was working on my mind, because the thought came to me, I wonder if I can be just God's friend. I wonder if he will just take over my life. Even if he doesn't solve this problem, I wonder if he'll just take over and do something worthwhile with my life. And then I began to think, why is it that people don't have this kind of relationship with God anymore? Because I was thinking of what I remembered from the Bible, how Elijah would talk to God, Moses would talk to God, and I was thinking, how come I don't see this kind of Christianity? Because for me, Christianity was go to church, sit down, listen to a long sermon, pray to stay awake until it's time to go home. That was church for me, right? It didn't appeal to me. I went because my parents said I should go. I had no desire. I thought you have to go to heaven, but I had that kind of religion didn't appeal to me at all. And so now I'm thinking, why don't I see the same thing that I see in the Bible? And I remember the verse I had learned as a boy, I am God and I change not. And I'm thinking, if God doesn't change, then it must be people who change. Maybe people can still talk to God like in the Bible, but maybe people change. And you know, I'm getting excited. I'm getting excited because I'm seeing something that I never saw in all my 22 years. I'm seeing a possibility to have a kind of relationship with God that is real. And so, you know, after 3 days, I thought, you know what? I'm going to ask God to help me to be his friend. I'm not going to ask him to do anything but help me to be his friend. And if he wants to keep the problem, fine. If I'm his friend, he will work it out. Because I remembered this verse, or 2 verses, help me to be a Christian. One of them was, all things work together for good to them that love God. Somehow God gave me faith in those 2 verses. The other one was, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Those were like gold to me in that moment. And so the 3rd day, the 5th of May, 1975, sometime between 10 and 12 in the day. I can tell you exactly when, because it was that moment that my life changed forever. Because that sometime in that period is when I prayed, 5th of May, 1975. And I don't remember if I knelt or I sat on the bed. But I talked to God for maybe 5 minutes for the first time in my life. And look here, when I started praying, the world was on my head. And when I finished, goodness me, I was never so light in my life. I remember graphically, I looked out the window. I've heard other people say the same exact thing. I never heard anybody say it. I looked out the window. There's an open space. There's an open piece of land in front of where we used to live. And I had never seen the grass so green, never. I looked at the sky, I had never seen it so blue. It's like everything was suddenly alive with a different vibrancy, and it's like I was seeing the world for the first time. I was so happy, I was filled with joy. And look, I never said anything to anybody because For 5 years, my mother had been on me to get me to go to church. And she had been praying for me unceasingly. And when I got up that Sabbath and put on my clothes to go to church, she almost fell over. I never went back. I never went back. And that is why I know that many times when you see people come to Christianity and they stay a year or a few months, it's because they haven't really found the reality of what Christianity means. Because one thing that God did for me, one blessing, was that he helped me to find the person. Not religion, the person. And I want to say this because I would like you to understand it has colored my experience in the 43 years since. This has been what has colored all my experience. I've learned doctrines. I've passed through different religious experiences, but everything has been radiating out from that central thing, that God is my friend. And I'm saying this because I'm wanting all of us to understand. Many of us here are focused on the truth about God. But I'm going to tell you that the truth about God is not the end point. It is God who is the end point. Amen. It means it's a tragedy when you know the truth about God and you don't know God. And I have found this to be so true in the movement that I belong to. So true, and it is one of the reasons why many persons, I believe, find some of the things that we are saying disturbing, because they are focused on the details about the truth about God, the doctrinal structure, but they do not know the person, God. Jesus says that at the end, many people are going to say, Lord, didn't we cast out devils in your name? In your name do many mighty and marvelous works. And Jesus does not say, you never knew the doctrines. He says, I never knew you. We never had a relationship person to person. God is a person. And I'm going to say this. I ask myself this question constantly. What is the end of the road? What is the target? What is the goal? What are we really after? Sometimes we say it is to know the truth. Sometimes we say it is to understand God. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, because I like to zero in on the target, because I believe if you start focusing on the wrong thing, you will never obtain the answer that really is worthwhile. You'll never get to where you really ought to be if you don't have your eyes focused on the right thing and you don't have your priorities clearly laid out before you. In fact, I'd like to ask all of you to think about this question. I'd like to ask all of you to think about it, and tomorrow I'm going to say a little bit more about it, but I want to ask you, what really is it that we really need, and what is it that God really wants? What does God really want? I want you to think about that question, because you can reach 90% of the journey and still be missing that last 10%. A lot of people, they get part way there. In our movement, I see it, okay? And it's part of the reason, for, as I said, for the conflict and the disagreements and the arguments. Now, after I became a Christian, I wanted to be a minister. Of course. My father used to be a minister. And my father told us something very strange. I've not said this in public. I don't like to say it in public. I don't know why I'm going to say it tonight, but I'm going to do it. My father said God showed him that he would not be a shadow of his seed. All right? Strange thing. I never asked my father, how did God say it to you? I should have. But he said it to his children, okay? And when I became a Christian, that stuck in my mind. And what I understood it to be saying, my father had a reputation for being an outstanding preacher. In fact, when he was in college, they called him Pope, because he was like, none of none of his children have equaled him in terms of his gift of speaking and his ability to use the language. My father was very eloquent and gifted in this way. So when Daddy said, God showed him that he would not be a shadow of his seed, none of us took it very seriously because none of us had Daddy's gifts of speaking and preaching. But I still wanted to become a pastor, so I went to the Adventist University. At that time it was a college in Jamaica, West Indies College, and I wrote a letter to the president, which I handed to his secretary, explaining that I wanted to become a minister and I wanted to be accepted in the program because at this time something had happened to me and I'm exposing up myself. But when I was 19 years old, I became a father due to that wild life I was living. But in Jamaica, once you have had a child out of wedlock, they will not accept you in the ministry in the Adventist church. So I wrote this letter and I explained, I explained my mistake in the past, and I said I wanted to become a minister and would they accept me in the program. Well, I never received an answer from them. I wrote to Andrews, Oakwood, Southern. I wrote to every Adventist university I could find the address of. Several of them in America accepted me, but I needed like $7,000 to $12,000 to even get into the program. And at that time, $100 was a lot of money for me. So it was out of the question. So anyway, I thought I would never be a minister. And so I gave up the dream and I became a teacher. I went to teachers' college, I became a teacher, but something happened to me that I couldn't live with. I found myself having Bible studies with the students constantly. And I began to feel like I'm robbing the government, okay? Because they're paying me to teach whatever it was I was teaching, English, history, art, and every day I'm having Bible studies with the students and it's bothering my conscience. And I began to think, I have to get out of this job. Now, it's a very long story, right? But the long and short of it is that I began to ask God to give me indicators if he wanted me to leave teaching and to start preaching. And some startling things happened. Like, for example, I knew that if I ever became a preacher, a minister, I wouldn't have a job. I would have to be taken care of some way. And I asked God one Sabbath as I was going to church, I said, God, if you want me to do this, please let somebody give me some money today just for me to know it's what you want me to do. Because that had never happened before in my life. When I went to church, a sister gave me a little brown envelope, 100 Jamaican dollars in it, and it was written on the outside, this is for your personal use. That's the morning I asked God. So that I'm thinking, all right, God is saying something to me. So that was one of the things. Another day I asked God again, I said, please give me an answer from your word. I took my Bible and I opened it and I put my finger. And the verse said, and Jehoshaphat was 35 years, and Jehoshaphat began to reign over Israel. He was 35 years old when he began to reign. 2 days before that was my 35th birthday. I looked at the Bible and I found the word 35 only 2 places in the Bible. My finger happened to fall on one place, just on the occasion of my 35th birthday. So, for 1 year I prayed, because at this point I didn't want to make any mistakes. And at the end of 1 year, I resigned the job. I had a wife, I had 3 children, I had no job, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And everybody said I was crazy, except my poor wife, because she believed in me. And she never, ever, in all the trauma that happened afterwards, my wife never looked at me one day and said, you're crazy. She just bore with me. Because I'm going to tell you that for 6 months, they would say, a friend of mine would say, we went through hell bareheaded. I'll tell you, if I had not had the assurance of those 6, of that year of prayer, I couldn't have endured it. The thing is, I couldn't tell anybody when I had any need because my brothers were working. They would have helped me. But I made a promise to God that if I do this, nobody will ever know that I'm in need. Nobody is going to say, God took you out of your job to make you beg or to make you starve. So I could never say anything to anybody. And I'm going to tell you, that is a time in my life when I saw the most miracles. And that is a time when we went through the hardest time of all, but I saw the most miracles. Some little, what you would call little miracles, but remarkable to me. Like one Sabbath, we never ever went without a meal, but it was not bread and butter. Sometimes it was bread and water. So, one Sabbath we went to church. 3 children, my wife and I. We know there's nothing for lunch. And Sabbath in Jamaica, we normally have the best lunch. I guess it's a Jamaican thing. I don't know if it's the same thing here. But went to church, no lunch, nothing for lunch, not even a biscuit. And I said to my wife, somebody will invite us for lunch. Went to church is over, we shake everybody's hand. Nobody invites us for lunch. So we go back home, and we're changing off, and my wife says, what are we going to do? I'm okay, she's okay, but we have 3 children. The youngest is like about 2 or 3 years old. What are we going to do? I'm feeling discouraged, and I'm feeling like a dog because I put my family in this condition. And I say, I don't know, let's pray. Right, I'm ready to cry. But I said, let's pray. So, we kneel down and we are praying, and while we are praying, somebody calls at the gate. When I go out there, there's a brother standing there. He never did this before, and he has never done it since, and I've known him for 40 years. That one Sabbath he said, David, man, I should have come earlier. I'm sorry, I'm just coming. Today is my anniversary, and you know, we have prepared an anniversary meal, and we want you and your family to come and share it with us. And I said, well, I'll consider it. Not on your life, man. It's an anniversary dinner. It's everything. It's all kinds of food prepared long before. I remember another time, my daughter has gone to school, my eldest child, and there's no lunch. And even though we had the 2 little boys at home, the hardest thing was a little girl is coming home from school. She was about 10, and no lunch. And I'm there, and I don't know what to do. And I sold my bike, and I bought a bicycle because I said if I leave my job, I won't have any money to buy gas. So I sold the bike, and I bought a bicycle. So I thought, let me go and check the post office. So I jumped on the bicycle and I rode to the post office, nothing. So my sister-in-law had a little shop in the square, in the town where we live. So I went and I sat in the shop, and she was talking to me, but I wasn't paying attention because I was so discouraged. And finally, I decided to go into the park and pray. So I got up, I went into the park, I sat on a bench, very discouraged, and I'm talking to God. And then I looked up in the tree, and I saw 2 blackbirds. And they were fat and shining. And the thought came into my head, consider the birds of the air. They do not sow nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. I felt a little surge of encouragement. I saw one of the birds fly down and pick up something. Off it went. And I thought, look how God provided that bird's lunch. The next one flew down, picked up something, and was gone. And I thought, God provided for those 2 birds. My family can't go hungry. I jumped up, and I was full of encouragement. I went into the shop. I said, all right, Jill, I'm off. And I jumped on my bicycle, and I was riding off. And she said, oh, David, wait. Somebody just left $8 for you. Look here, $8 in Jamaica today can't buy a sweet. But in those days, I went home with bread, flour, sugar, cooking oil, whatever it is. We could go home. By the time I was going home, I passed my daughter coming home from school. So by the time she got home, there was something to eat. So, during that time, I saw God's hand. I never had to ask anybody for 1 cent. One night, my old father gave me $10, and I almost cried. I thought, I have to take $10 from my father when I should be taking care of him. It grieved me in my spirit. But I didn't ask him, and he gave it voluntarily, and he didn't know. It helped us to have something to eat that night. And I learned something in that time, because I always took some pride in being able to share with other people. And in that time, I learned the humility of being able to receive from people. Because I had a kind of pride where I didn't want anybody to give me anything. But I learned that sometimes God will provide in this way, and sometimes in that way, and who are you to tell God how to do things? Everything comes from God. Whether you work for it or it comes as a gift, if you are His, He provides how He chooses. I remember another unusual thing that happened, which I like to call the 10-cent miracle. This happened while I was still working, but still it's so striking that I want to share it too. So, I used to work 10 miles away from home. Now in Jamaica, the bus system is not like here. You have many buses that run from Mandeville to Kingston, 2 hours. And the journey, at that time they would charge maybe about $10 for the journey. Now I work just a short distance away, and the fare to go there is $2. So they don't like to carry people who are going where I am going. They want to carry a passenger who will give them $10. I will only give them $2. So we usually go and we stand on the corner. When the bus comes, we stop the bus. They say, "Where are you going?" We don't answer, we jump in the bus. Right? Because if you say, "I'm going to Porus," they won't take you, they'll drive off. So we don't answer, we jump in the bus. Then when we get to Porus, you say, "Please stop," and then they stop and they grumble a little bit, but they take your $2 and they go on. Now this morning, I searched through the entire house and I found $1.90. Okay? Every corner, $1.90. So I went and stood on the corner with my $1.90, and I'm thinking, if I give this bus conductor $1.90, he's going to embarrass me on the bus. Especially because I'm not going to Kingston, I'm going to Porus. I'm taking up one of his passengers' spaces, and then I'm going to only give him 10 cents short. If you know Jamaican conductors, they are the most rowdy, outrageous, ill-mannered people. And I know this guy is going to embarrass me on the bus this morning. So, the thought came to me, why don't you pray about it? And I thought, man, it's just a little embarrassment, it's not anything. And the thought came, he's your father. Talk to him. Amen. So, I prayed. I just said, Lord, I need 10 cents. I know it's not anything, but it will be embarrassing if this guy. So anyway, I talked to God, and I opened my eyes, and I looked up and I saw a pencil roll across the road. I looked up because a pencil is rolling across the road. Where is it coming from? I don't see anybody. The pencil is just rolling across the road in limbo. And the pencil rolled right to my feet, and it stopped on 10 cents. If it was 20 cents or $1 or 5 cents, it wouldn't mean so much. It stopped on 10 cents. Goodness me, if it had been $1 million, it wouldn't have meant as much. There's an old man who used to live not far from us. They call him Watermouth because he used to dribble a lot. But this old man said, he thought that God and Satan had a fight, and Satan won the fight. And Satan was now running things. And I said, why do you think so, Mr. Manta? And he said, because God isn't answering prayers anymore. Because he asked God for $1 million and all he got was 10 cents. And that morning when I saw that 10 cents, man, I thought, Mr. Manta, and I wish he knew what he was saying. Because that 10 cents meant so much to me that morning. So anyway, You know, God was showing me that he was real. And he was my friend. Little things, little things. I have so many of these stories I can tell you. Little things. And when I look back on it and I ask myself why, I realized that I think the reason is the only thing I wanted out of God was to be his friend. The ambition I had, and I hate to say it's not quite as driving as it was, but the ambition I had, I wanted to be the best friend that God had on earth. That's the way I wanted it. That's the way it came to me. And it was simple and it was straight to the point and it was easy. It was easy. Because you don't need to study theology to be somebody's friend. You don't need to have a bag of doctrines to be somebody's friend. If you want to know how to make friends, ask your child. Every one of us can do that simple thing of making friends. We know how to make friends. If you just follow the simple pattern of knowing you are dealing with somebody who is rational and reasonable and has a heart like yours, and somebody who wants to be your friend more than you want to be his friend. Once you have these basic truths in your mind, nobody needs to tell you how to become this person's friend. And I found that I was being very much blessed by having this focus. Anyway, I left the job and things were pretty hard, but the first unusual thing that happened was that one day I got $100 in the mail from somebody in Florida. And somebody I didn't know, and this person said, look here, I saw a tract that you wrote. At that time I wrote a tract about the mark of the beast. The lady says, I got this tract and I just want to send this money to you. She sent me $100. And every month until she died, she sent $100. And that was how I first started to kind of catch my breath. Because up to that point, everything was so tight. We were just struggling from meal to meal. And then after that, somehow, I'll tell you this, okay? Somebody said, I saw somebody say on one of those Facebook forums, that I and Howard and Nader and Imad, we have made a pretty good living out of the ministry. I heard somebody said it, and it hurt me a little bit. But then, after a while, I realized that people will say things when they don't have a clue. The first time I ever lived in a place where I knew I would never have to move again is when I was 40 years old. My father never owned a house. And I planned to live like that till I died too, right? I never had that ambition because I was accustomed to that. We lived in a rented house. We had to move. We were embarrassed. It was a lifestyle. I never knew what it was to be stable. I moved every 2 years almost. I had to move. I never became a part of the gospel to make money or to be rich. No, no, no. And it has not worked that way either. Okay? I can tell you, the first car I ever got was a gift from a sister who was a doctor because she was sorry for me because I rode a bike all over Jamaica. I rode a bike for 25 years. I've owned 15 bikes. I rode all over Jamaica. I got wet in the rain. I came in freezing at night. I couldn't touch my wife because my feet were like ice. And it wasn't a problem because every Sabbath I would go visit groups. I would stay overnight sometimes. Sometimes I'd be coming back 11 o'clock in the night. And the sister, she got sorry for me. She called me one day and said she was buying a car for me. She gave me the car. And in 2 years, she said she was going to change it. She got a newer model. 2 years, she changed it. And 6 months later, she died. And that's how I got a car. And ever since then, I just simply try. Every 2 years, I change and keep it up to date. And if I have some money, I add a little bit to it, so I keep up to date. That's how I got a car. How I got a house. I was living in this rented house, and one day a brother said he had bought a little piece of land, and he wanted to give me a little square, less than quarter acre. I said, Brother Bill, why are you giving me land? I don't have any use for land. I mean, I don't have any money to build anything. Why are you giving me land? Brother Bill said, no, I am giving this to you. So there I am, I have a little piece of land. One one day my mother called me and she had gotten some money, $2,000. She says, David, buy some building blocks. I said, Mama, what are you doing? I don't have, you're putting me in trouble because you start something, you have to continue, and I don't have any money. But she insisted, so we got a brother to come and make some blocks that he put down there in the place. Before I know it, the brother who gave me the land, he gathered some people together and they dig the foundation. And then they put up some walls, and now I have a piece of land and I have 4 walls. And before you know it, he said somebody had donated $70,000 to put on a roof. Up to this point, I have not spent 1 cent. I had 4 walls and a roof, okay? And I mean, it's not like here. What I had was 4 walls and a roof, and I think there were like 2 divisions, a little part for the living room and 1 bedroom, something like that. So, one day he came and he said, David, why don't you move into this, and then you can use the rent that you're paying to try to fix it up. I said, I can't live in this, there are no windows. And the walls are not rendered, it's just a bare block and there's no ceiling. He says, no problem, man, we'll put tin over the windows, we'll put zinc over the windows, and we will concrete the floor, and you can fix up a little bit at a time. So I did. I moved in. And I remember one day some people came to visit me, and I couldn't let them come into the house. I met them outside because I didn't want them to see the walls, because it was just bare block. And sometimes in Jamaica, those things are a little sensitive. You don't want people to think you are so dirt poor. But anyway, I'm just telling you, letting you into my life, because I want you to know the journey the Lord took me on. So, little by little, we fixed up until I could get, my children could have a room. The walls got rendered, we put in the ceiling, we tiled the floor, we got real windows, and today I have a home, okay? And this is why when somebody comes and makes a comment like that, it rankles a little bit, because they don't know anything about the journey, right? Today, we had to register our ministry because we keep handling money when people send in donations, and the bank keeps asking me every time I go there, are you registered? Because everything is becoming stricter and stricter. The control of the money is becoming tighter and tighter, and everything is put in place for the setting up of the mark of the beast system. But we had to register, and as a part of that condition, I'll tell you this. Brother Howard and I no longer get an income from the ministry. Everything that goes to Open Face Fellowship has to go directly into the ministry. It goes into whatever the ministry does. Nothing comes to me personally or to Brother Howard personally. The Lord has worked it out in the last few months that it does not matter. Yes. Praise the Lord. Amen. God has worked out a way that I don't need to get an income from the money that comes to the ministry. God is good. Amen. You know, and I mean, when I think of how God has worked, I have no right. I have no right. Look at me. I mean, I have no right to be somebody who's sharing the gospel in different parts of the world. When I think of, suppose I had become an Adventist minister, I'd be in some bush in Jamaica, up in some hilltop, looking after 4 little churches. Today, I have the privilege of preaching in many different countries in the world. I am amazed at how God does things. He is amazing. And it's like my father's prophecy. I'm just looking and thinking, I'm not a great preacher like my daddy, but where did my daddy preach? He never went beyond Jamaica. Today, God has worked it out that through videos, newsletters, and camp meetings, I've had the privilege of sharing the gospel all over the world.
Amen.
The scripture has been fulfilled on me where Jesus says, if a man leave mother and father, houses, lands, he will receive 100-fold more in this life. and in the world to come eternal life. I'm maybe the only person here. I can go to Australia and I can find houses there, homes. I can go I can go all over America and I don't have to pay to stay at a hotel. The scripture has been fulfilled on me. I have homes and family everywhere in the world. Amen. And I'm thinking, God is so amazing. Now, anyway, that's kind of like a little gloating. Just happy. But the thing is, along the way, I got involved with this movement that we call the One True God movement. That was from way back in 1995, before some of you even were Adventists or even knew there was a movement. And like most people, for the most part, I was so excited about it. I was excited and I was angry because I discovered that we had been deceived for so long. I read the Bible and I had glimmerings that God had a Son and that the Holy Spirit was an extension of the Father and the Son. I had glimmerings, but my mind was clouded and obstructed by false teaching. And when I discovered that this deception, this false information was deliberate, I became very angry. I got upset. And that is where we started to put out materials. Brother Howard and I, we started working together way back in 1995, and we began to put out materials which began to reach out across the world, and then we began to visit other countries out of that. And this continued to be my emphasis for 10 years. 10 years. Now in 2005 something happened, and this was a turning point. In 2005, I was in my kitchen praying one morning. Now you have to know, the thing I've wanted more than anything else in my life is to be perfect. Right? To be God's friend and to be perfect. I had the wrong idea of what perfection means, but it was logical and it was reasonable based on the things I had learned, because I thought I was going to be perfect by correcting every single possible wrong thought or wrong action. I remember one morning I was jogging and I saw something on the road, and it awakened something in my mind, and I knew I was going to think something. And I said, I'm not going to think this. And you know what happens when you think you're not going to think something, right? For a half mile I ran, and I thought about birds, and I thought about trees, and I thought about racing. I thought about everything to prevent this thought from coming into my head. And it was just sitting there with folded arms waiting to ambush me. Because at some point, half a mile down the road, it just jumped into my mind, and I went home feeling so defeated because I didn't understand so many things. I tried to become perfect by, somebody said at one point that if you lick your fingers between meals, it's a sin. I tried to be perfect in this way, okay? I tried to be perfect in every single aspect of behavior. I tried to fix everything. But how many different ways can a person behave? Maybe 1 million. It's hard to fix 1 million different kinds of behavior. It's hard to deal with sin in this way. And I found myself, how old was I at the time? I was about 40, I was about 50. I was about 50 at the time. And I'm here in my kitchen and I'm praying and I'm saying, oh God, when will I ever become what you want me to be? When will I ever become victorious over these things? When will I ever change? Because it has been what? Nearly 30 years now. And it's like, I like to compare it to this. And you've probably heard me use this illustration before, but it's so graphic and it's so true. For me, it felt like you're climbing a hill, a smooth hill, and it's made of glass, right? And it's covered with oil. So it was like that. So you creep up, you inch up 2 inches, and you slide down 3 inches. And you have been doing this for 30 years. And you're thinking, I just have to keep doing this. Someday, somehow, it's going to work. But at the moment, it appears pretty hopeless. But what else is there to do? That was my theology that I developed over these years from my association and the things I had learned. So this morning I'm praying and I'm saying, oh God, when will I ever change? When will I ever change? And out of the darkness, it's like somebody said to me, you will never change. You don't need to change. What you need to do is to die and let somebody else live. The same thing that I had discovered when I became a Christian way back in 1975, God was bringing it back to me in a different way, with a different perspective and understanding. The thing is that just at that point in time, I had just been exposed to the idea of the two Adams. Two lives, two different people. For the first time, it hit me what the two Adams mean, because up to this point, people always spoke about it as a legal transaction. Legally, Adam condemns us. Legally, Jesus justifies us. But you know that if you are legally justified, you still have the problem of it's legally so. But experientially, it ain't so. That's what the legal idea of salvation does to us. And I'm going to tell you that most Christians are on the legal paradigm. One of the greatest things that God has brought to my attention in the last 19 years, 14 years, nearly 14 years now, is the truth that the legal paradigm is one of the most destructive misconceptions in the Christian world. The legal paradigm. The legal paradigm makes you focus on legal status instead of experience. And I saw the two Adams. Legally, you are condemned in Adam. And Jesus came to take away that condemnation legally. I never understood that it's a transaction of life. I am in Adam. Why? Because I possess the life of Adam. I possess a life that is alienated from God, that is carnal, that is prone to bad behavior. And as long as this life is my reality, I will live what I am. The answer to the sin problem I found out was to is it possible to transfer from this life to the other life? That was the question. And when I went to the Bible, I found the Bible teaches it strikingly clearly. Nobody ever brought this out to my attention or taught me before that point in time. And I realized that it was something that we needed so badly. So, this life has everything that I don't need, and yet it is what I was born with and what I've been living with even as a Christian. This life over here has everything that I need. Look here, Jesus lived a perfect life. Jesus conquered sin and the devil. This is in the life of Christ. Everything I was trying to do, climbing this glass mountain, already existed in this life. My problem is not how to create what is already created. My problem is how to move, how to transfer into this new reality. That was what I saw was the solution. And the Bible says it happens when you are what? Born again. When you become a part of Jesus Christ. It's not a theory. It's not a legal transaction. It's an actual experiential reality. And that is the thing. In my Christianity, I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, the whole focus has been, and this is what I know many of you appreciate and have experienced, the whole focus has been experience. Experience. If you're not experiencing Christianity, what are you doing in it? What, you like to talk about fine ideas? No. I have never enjoyed talking for talk's sake. Fine ideas are okay if they lead you to the experience. Like I say, so many people know the doctrine of God and they don't know God. Amen. The truth about God. Okay, fine. And where does it take you? What do you do with it? Well, I can win debates. No. It's about the experience that it takes you to. Brothers and sisters, the end point of our religion, I ask you to think about it, is God. The end point of our religion is God. And I don't mean God in the knowledge in your head. I mean God in your experience. The beautiful thing that God is doing for me is helping me to understand that the creator of worlds and atoms and DNA and stars and galaxies and systems, the incredible creator of the universe, has a heart like mine. I heard the King's Herald sing it. I heard them sing a song. I don't remember the title of the song. I want to try to find it. But one line of it goes like this: that through Jesus we learn that God the Father had a human heart. And the first time I heard it, I thought, what a ridiculous statement. It sounds blasphemous. But the more I understand what my heart is yearning for, the more I understand it is true. Look here. I met Olivia and Jordan and Jasmine. You know what I try hard to do? I try to talk on their level. I try to come down to their level because I want to be their friend, right? I try to talk to them on their level, find out what they are interested in, and try to communicate with them like that. I don't talk about I don't use high-flown language and use terms and ideas that is difficult for them, because if I do, we're in two different worlds. The reason I get along with my grandson is 6 years old, right? I'm 66, I'm 60 years older. And yet when I see him, the hearts come together, right? He sent me a little voice note. It pleases me so much, right? I sent him back a photo. I took a photo of those 3 kids and I sent them to him. My little 60-year-old grandson. What does that do? How do you communicate with 6 years old? Look here. I don't care that he can't comprehend my big words or big thoughts. For me, just to see him say, Grandpa, or send me a little photo, and to know he's thinking of Grandpa, it does so much for me. What do you think the God of the universe feels when he looks at you? What do you think? Oh, this is God. This is God. When you speak of him, you must be solemn, and you must be holy, and you must use the right words, and you must make sure you sit correctly and so on. Is this the way God is? I tell you, now as I understand better and better, I'm understanding that when we clear away all the smoke and the dust, all God ever wanted was our friendship. All God ever wanted was that we should come back to him. All the doctrines in the Bible, all the theological arguments and nuances and everything is just focused on this one thing, this one single thing, as far as you and I are concerned, that we should come to God and become his friends and to trust and love him, that we should find our place in his heart. That is what it is all about. So, in 2005, in my kitchen, I discovered that through faith, I could move from the old life into the new life. And in one moment, the perfection that I was looking for 30 years, in one moment I would find it in this new life, because Jesus is perfect. In fact, I found it in the Bible. The law made nothing perfect, but the bringing in of a better hope did. Hebrews 7 and verse 19. Hebrews 10 and verse 14. For by one offering he has perfected forever them that are sanctified. If somebody asks me if I'm perfect, I'm saying yes. If they ask me if I'm righteous, I'm saying yes. Because the Bible says he hath made, 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 21, he has made him to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. Christ has become everything to me since that time. I can't talk about anything without putting Jesus there. And I mean, it offends some people, okay? One brother in Jamaica said, he used these words, believe it or not. He said, all you people do, talking to Howard, all you people do is talk about Jesus, Jesus. Why don't you talk some more about the law? Incredible. Because so many people have the understanding that our message is the law. And the law has its place. But I'm telling you, something is wrong when you think that somebody is talking too much about Christ. Something is wrong. Our perspective is really warped. And it's not an aberration. There are many people who believe, who think like this. Now, from understanding this, I mean, that morning, I went to my wife, and I was so happy. I said, sweetheart, thank God I don't have to be perfect. I always remember the look on her face, because she knew that I was always focusing on perfection. But what I meant is, I don't have to be perfect. My perfection is already there. All I need to do is to step into that life, and I have what I'm looking for. And she didn't understand until in the evening I explained to her, and then she was all right. And you know, even in my home church in Jamaica, the first time I tried to share this, they opposed me. My own son opposed me. But you know, they eventually understood, and they came around. Now, here is the critical point I wanted to make. As I focused more and more on this question of Christ and his righteousness, more and more I have found out, and some of you here, I think, I'm saying this for you because I know there are some questions about some of the things that I say. There are people who say my attitude to the law is wrong. There are people who say I'm attacking the law. There are people who say my teachings are dangerous. And I want to explain to you. Why has it become necessary that in lifting up Christ, there are some ways in which I need to put down the law? I want to put it that way, right? I have never said that the law is no longer holy and just and good. I have never said that the law has become something bad. But I have said that when the law is put where Christ should be, it needs to be removed from that place. And when people have put the law where it doesn't belong and you try to move it, they become very upset about what you are doing. But tomorrow I'm going to try to explain more about this. One of the biggest problems is that people have put the law where Christ belongs. And it's understandable. It's understandable because it's the way of our upbringing. The law is in everything. But God has, anyway, I don't want to preempt myself and get ahead of where I want, what I'm going to say tomorrow. But there is a time, or there are certain circumstances under which something that is good can serve a bad purpose. And I'm going to tell you one example. No matter how good something is, you have different tiers of goodness. You have good, you have better, and you have best. If good is preventing you from receiving best, then good is bad. If good is preventing you from receiving best, then good is serving a bad purpose. It's not where it should be. It needs to be removed from that place. The work of good is bad, even though good itself is good. But it's bad because it's keeping you from best. And God's goal for you is best. That's the point. And that's what a lot of people don't understand about the law. It is good in its proper place. The Apostle Paul says it in 1 Timothy 1 and verse 8. For we know that the law is good if a man use it lawfully. It is being used unlawfully in many cases and in many places. And tomorrow I'm going to talk some more about that. But I wanted to give you this kind of background. After understanding righteousness by faith, the thing is, none of us should be static in our religion. If you have received the truth about God, the one true God, great, wonderful. But if you are stuck there, look here, that doctrine is intended to lead you someplace in your relationship with Christ. Do not sit there and get stuck in that place. One of the problems I have with my fellow ministers in this movement, I suppose they have the problem with me too, right? Somebody says, I'm always trying to find something new and exciting, right? I'm trying to find something to stir up people because I like to be innovative. And every time somebody says something like this, it makes me stop and think, is this true? But it's not true. When do you feel that you have arrived? When do you feel that you have arrived? When is it that you feel that, okay, I found the Holy Grail, I found the end point, I found the message of all messages, I can stop here. Look here, it is when you are in that perfect relationship with God and not before. Until that time, everything is just a channel leading you to that great central point. The truth about God is an amazing truth, but it takes you somewhere. Be sure you move on to the next step, and when you get to the next step, make sure that you understand where God is trying to take you and you don't stop partway along the journey. So, everything that stands in the way of this relationship has to go. You see, the key is understanding this. All right? I'm going to ask a question, and I want you to think about it. I'm going to expand on it a little bit more tomorrow. To understand where God wants us to go, I'm going to ask you a question. In the beginning, what is the original problem with the universe and between humanity and God? I'm going to answer this question tomorrow as I understand it, but I want you to think about it tonight. In the beginning, what was the problem that caused the universe to fall into this problem? And what was the problem between God and man? What was the problem between God and man? How you understand this will determine what you're looking for and what you're focused on. Tomorrow I will deal with this some more. So I just wanted to give you this kind of background today, tonight. I know it's a little late, and I wanted you to, those of you who don't know me, to get an idea of where I'm coming from, why I'm here, and what you can expect this weekend. I want to thank you all for turning out, and I appreciate the support, and I look forward to getting to know you better.